Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new week. I thought first order of business is that I have a very exciting punch card to punch, which is I just finished my first 6-week workout bundle. So ceremoniously, we shall punch it together. Workout-wise, I do feel a difference. The challenge that I had started for myself in December was really consistently working out 4 times a week and doing like weightlifting, which it has always been not my thing. And in the past, I would always say like I worked out on average like 3 to 4 times a week, but I was doing different classes and sometimes it would be once a week and sometimes it would be 5 times a week. So it was just really inconsistent. So I decided that I would do 4 times a week and actually see if there are any noticeable changes in my body, both looks-wise and feels-wise. And I don't think I look any different, which is fine, but I do feel stronger and I feel less sore when I do work out. Like I feel like I'm starting to build up some strength, which is good, which probably means I need to go up in weights, I guess. I don't know. I'm new to the whole thing. But all that to say, I feel like doing that for 6 weeks was exactly what my mind could take. So I'm feeling proud of that. I thought I could show you a little bit of what I'm wearing. I got the best white t-shirts from Uniqlo. I've been on the hunt for a good white t-shirt for years. And I feel like anytime they're, like I don't want them super tight, but then the sleeve will be really baggy. And this sleeve is perfect. It just like is normal. It just like normal fits to my arm in a good way, but the shirt itself isn't like skin tight. So I love that. And then I got this beautiful mohair sweater as a hand-me-down from my sister. And it is from Cezanne, but I love it so much. You can wear it like backwards and stuff, and it has like a little low, like sort of cardigan-esque thing. If you watched a couple videos back, I spent a lot of time like washing all my sweaters in the bathtub, and it worked super well for all of the true wool sweaters. I will never do it again with anything that is a mix of acrylic or polyester. There were some that were like polyester and wool, or like polyester and alpaca. And I was like, well, I want to treat the wool well. I won't do it again. They took so long to dry, but the real wool and like this mohair one was perfect. It like washed super well and it dried super quickly, which I guess makes sense if you think about the wool on the sheep. Like if they get wet, they have to be able to dry quickly. So anyway, I'm really happy with like how it ended up washing. Right now, we are going to cook one of my favorite dishes ever. It is a cold citrus soba noodle dish. When I was going into an office every day, I would make this on Sunday and then bring it in the whole week. It is so good. I would always like gorge on it because it's like I just can't stop eating. The taste is so good. But also it keeps really well for an entire week. So if you go into work and you need to pack lunch, this is so good for you. after, I would say like one day or even a couple hours, the noodles really soak into the sauce. And so then it gets like, everything is pretty covered in the sauce. I also recommend like putting it in a jar because I feel like when you keep it more vertical, the sauce is more evenly distributed. That might be fake, but that feels real to me. Highly recommend this though. Very, very good. I'm about to start on a project that I have been avoiding for a little while now, which is basically to switch all my stuff from this closet and put it in the closet in the other bedroom. I used to sleep in this room, but I switched a few months ago, and now this room needs to be like open for guests to stay in and things like that. And I just need to have all my stuff in one room. So I'm actually doing it after 2 months of just putting it off. So we're just gonna get that done now. Also, I should say I've been avoiding it because I just don't want to be confronted with the amount of stuff that I have. I feel like I'm always just going through stuff and somehow like the stuff is still never ending. So I might be going through some clothes while I do this, which I just knew it was gonna become a whole other task, but that's okay because we're gonna do it now. I decided not to go through all my stuff because I always do this thing where I like can't do a project because I know that it's gonna end up being like 3 or 4 projects. So I was like, you know what, let me just break that cycle and just do the one project, which is like moving closets. It's not perfect, it is overstuffed, but it is done, and that means that I can do other things now later. Like maybe I go through all my clothes with a friend or someone and make it fun so that I'm not just spending like hours going through my closet, you know, all at once. We're just gonna spread it out a little bit. it's a new day and I'm gonna go run these art books back to the library. I might see what else is there. I had gotten like 4 art books and I'm only gonna look at 2 of them at a time because they're just too dense, but I might get these at a later date. One is about postmodern architecture, kind of maximalism, and then the other one is about nonconformers and new history on self-taught artists. So we'll see if I bring those back. And then I'm gonna try to go on like a walk. I don't wanna go on a proper hike because I've been working out a lot and I just wanna like walk on a sidewalk, but near nature. So hopefully we can find that. It's so funny whenever I wear like real clothes out in nature, like on a trail, I always feel like connected to the earth more. Maybe it's because I'm wearing cotton, or maybe it's because I'm dressed like how people would have dressed before they had like plastic, yoga pants. Like I'm wearing like a cotton shirt and like blue jeans. Do wish I had different shoes on though, because I'm wearing my Doc Marten slides and it is still pretty rocky. I mean, this is a very easy, flat trail pretty much, but I thought I was gonna be on a sidewalk, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of love like just looking really normal on a trail. These bushes are so fragrant. They're something sagey, I think, but they're plentiful and there's just like a cloud of fragrance right here. I have returned home and changed immediately, put my hair up, and I'm wearing my Free People one-piece onesie set. It's got like a little hood on the back, which doesn't need that, but I always just put this on immediately when I got home. We are going to make pasta tonight, and that will be our little evening activity. It's a really interesting recipe from Love and Lemons, and it's like a corn pasta, but you do this weird technique where you like milk the corn with the back of a knife. So it's like you cut all the corn off the cob and then you use the back of the blade, and then like this kind of juice comes out. This sounds ridiculous, but you'll see the whole thing when I do it. And then that'll be that for tonight. Cool. Also, apologies if the lighting like really drastically changes in here. The sun is setting right now, so hopefully it won't be too annoying to look at, but I do foresee it going from light to dark very quickly. pasta is finished. It smells so good. It's really good. Very different, very unique. Recommend it. So it is a new day and I just finished the book that I was reading, so I thought that I would tell you about it. One of my favorite things to do is read out loud, so I will read like 5 to 8 quotes after I tell you my thoughts about it. The book is called Girl on Girl. It's by Sophie Gilbert, and it's a really big book right now, sort of in the zeitgeist. So a lot of people are talking about it, and I totally understand why. The book basically takes you on a journey of understanding how women were pitted against each other, starting with the late 90s, early 2000s through to today. First, I guess it was really interesting to be reading a book where I knew like 80% of the references. I feel like normally when I'm reading nonfiction, it's about a different time and I don't really understand the cultural context around it. So it was super interesting being like, I remember that picture of Paris Hilton. I remember this movie, or I remember how this thing made me feel when I experienced it. And that was a really interesting, unique thing in this read, was that I knew all the references. Definitely some of the takes were like calling me in and some of the takes were things that I'd heard before, but it was nice to see it all sort of in a timeline. One of the things that it starts with is this idea that in the 90s, there was this sort of movement toward feminism, like with the Lilith Fair music festival and also the Riot Grrrl scene, and how quickly it turned into commercialism. She specifically talks about how the term girl power was first noted in a zine, in a Riot Grrrl zine, and then it was used, sort of appropriated by this like father-son producer duo who created the Spice Girls to create girl power. And this is like a good example of things that she shows throughout the book, of a comparison where something had weight and was trying to change something systemically, and then that thing was sort of used for capitalist gain without any real change of system. So with the Spice Girls example, they were sort of, you know, promoting this idea that like girls can do anything they want. And I don't necessarily think that that's like a writ large bad. I think that that still probably influenced a lot of little girls to like believe in themselves. But she basically says that like, yeah, like girls can do anything they want, but no systems were changed by just saying those things. Whereas Riot Grrrl was trying to change the punk scene, the punk music scene from the ground up. So those sort of like juxtapositions were really interesting to me in the book. And the Spice Girls chapter was really interesting for me to read because one of the critiques that she makes of it is that it was basically idealizing this sort of adult lifestyle that a 10-year-old girl would dream up that she could have at a sleepover. And I feel like that was hard for me to hear because I still want that. Like I still kind of want a lifestyle that a 10-year-old would dream up at a sleepover, you know? And I think that that was interesting to hear, like as a reality check. And another thing that was sort of hard was she uses Bridget Jones as a representation of like post-feminism and a post-feminist type of woman. And I love Bridget Jones and I love rom-coms. And so there were things like that where I was like, okay, maybe I agree with that to an extent, but at the same time, like, I think it's good to have like, you know, imperfect women at the front. And she talks more about that too, like talking about like in the 2010s, girls and the Mindy Project and things like that. But it's really interesting the way she describes the juxtapositions of feminist movements and what seem like feminist movements but are ultimately kind of empty. I will also say that there is one chapter in the middle of the book that I found really difficult to read. I'm not really like a squeamish reader. Like I read and loved A Little Life, right? But there was something about this chapter, it being nonfiction, that just I found it disturbing, but it was just truth. And basically the chapter was all about the corn industry and how women were really taken advantage of, and how that basically like captured a cultural consciousness and changed our idea of sex, and specifically men's perceptions of what women should do in sex. And there were a lot of very like objective but explicit details about things that these adult film stars had to go through. And to be honest, I don't know, when I was reading it, I just felt so disturbed by what I was reading. And I think it's important to know those details, to know how bad things can be, and to believe women and to be able to support them. But I had to skip over some of it because I was just so disturbed reading what these real men made these real women do, and how that kind of proliferated things in society. So I will just say that as a trigger warning, but the book itself is really well researched, and I think that she, for the most part, has a perspective that holds many things at once. But I just wanted to make that as a quick note. She covers a lot of different topics, including intersectionalism. She talks a lot about Black women's experiences in the early aughts. She talks about girl bosses and the girl boss movement, which I thought was a really interesting chapter, talking about like the failings of sort of my generation of millennial women in the workplace. She talks about TV shows and trends of women, the way they're perceived in like teen sex comedies of the 90s, where men basically looked at women as the gatekeepers to the one thing that they wanted was to lose their virginity, all the way through to like the 2010s, where there was like a big representation of women as the train wreck. There's politics and paparazzi and reality TV and these very wide swaths of pop culture markers that all contribute to this thesis that women's progress is on a swinging pendulum of course corrections. We lose rights in the US for women, and then we try to course correct by working within the system. We try to work outside of the system. And then when there are successes, that pendulum swings right back to lots of losing rights, or at least losing social capital in the perspective of those in power who are men. So I think this is a really compelling book. I found it fascinating to read. I found it true and interesting. There were some parts where maybe I didn't 100% agree with the statements that were made, but I would say for the most part, I was really, really compelled and interested in everything that this author had to write. So with that, I will read you a couple of quotes. This is one of the first chapters. Girl power as an early 1990s ideology was intentionally political. It filtered punk's rage through lived experience, demanding more space and respect for women at live shows and throughout the industry, as well as creating radical texts that often resembled, with their use of collage drawings and block letters, a girl's diary. In talking about the term girl power and just like coming of age as a woman, she says, "I've always wondered why people diminish girlhood as somehow cosseted or twee, when the reality of coming of age as a young woman is so raw, filled with emotional violence and literal blood. Do girls not suffer enough to be taken seriously?" Here she's talking about the early 2000s, and she says, "In the early aughts, in any direction you looked, popular culture was constantly promoting and celebrating a, quote, empowered vision of sexuality that was wholeheartedly informed by male desire and male pleasure." Here she's talking about American Pie and sort of the sex comedies of the early 2000s. "It appeared to connect intensely with the boys I knew who were insistent on losing their virginities and often openly hostile to the girls whom they saw as thwarting them." In talking about the rise of parasocial relationships online, she says, "Seeing all the ways in which womanhood has been tailored into something narrow and even archaic by a media culture that has trained us to surveil ourselves and adjust things accordingly. No matter how authentic anyone perceives herself to be, there is still something about the scrutiny of others that influences the ways in which we behave, for good and for bad. The aughts were a decade in which women were more visible in public life than ever before, and yet still mediated by the limited ways in which audiences wanted to see them. The rewards could be unimaginable, the blowback could be fatal. In talking about the 2010s, when narrative writing style on blogs became popular with women, she says, "The writers I wanted to explore in this chapter all do the same things. Recreate, with quite gnarly honesty, their experiences of 21st century womanhood, probe the conditions they're living under, and force their way into an artistic realm that has not historically welcomed them. Most address a problem that, as Gold puts it, at its most fundamental level is the power imbalance inherent in heterosexuality, and I'd add in art." I'm actually going to stop there with the quotes. I had like hundreds of highlights in my book, but I only wanted to give you a little snapshot. And just to end on a glimmer of hope, you know, she says that soon will be due for our pendulum to swing back to the progressive movement, and hopefully we'll be ready in the most intersectional way that we can when that happens. Okay, I'm actually going to end the vlog here as well. So thank you so much for spending time with me this week. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next week.